Hey everybody, welcome to Beyond Range. So today we're going to be making a video with GTO Wizard playing their trainer. We're going to be playing 3-bet pots, all the scenarios that come up, and we're going to see what happens. The small blind has 3-bet cutoff in this situation, and the board texture is Ace-King 3. So this is going to be a very high advantage board texture for out of position. He's going to have all of the ace kings, he's going to have aces kings, and the cutoff is not going to be calling very many pocket threes. He can have a sprinkling of things like ace king, but this is going to be a very good texture for him. So in terms of where we are in our range, this is clearly a fold, but you can start to think about different portions of your range. And what might likely continue, how many hands you would have as raise. When he uses a larger bet sizing, he's going to have a slightly stronger range, so we will have less raises. Here on the 10-9-8, we face a 3-bet from a fairly polarized big blind. Right, so he's going to be 3-betting less hands like pocket sevens, eights, nines. He's going to be 3-betting a lot of the overpair region, and ace king and ace queen and whatnot. So we have pocket eights, and basically you may get to these situations and you might look at your hand and you might say, my pocket eights on this board look very good, therefore I should make a decision to raise, call, or fold. But you can think about the overall frequency of your range that decides to raise. In this situation, our opponent is going to try to push their advantage in terms of the top end part of their range, which is like aces, kings, queens, jacks, but they don't really have a nut advantage in this situation. So they will be betting fairly often, but in position is going to leverage his nuts by raising more often. Otherwise, in position's range is a little bit too strong when he plays all of his calls, all of his nuts as call in this spot on the flop. So what you'll see is that there is a decent amount of raise, but still you're only using a portion of your hands like pocket eights, nines, queen, jack in your raising range. So let's say if your overall raising range is something like 10-15%, you might find that something like pocket eights might raise something like 30, 40, 50%, etc. So mostly this hand is going to call. Apparently it's pure calling, which is nice. So the turn here, this is going to be another situation where it's pretty efficient hand to continue basically by considering your range. Now you want to think about when you're in this spot, when you end up calling, what hands can be devalued. And what hands is your opponent forced to call after he makes this bet, and what is his minimum value. Is he continuing to bet queens, jacks, etc.? Now, you don't really have to think. These are very individual sort of things that we're thinking about. You do want to think big picture, but sometimes the only way to think big picture is to think about individual spots. So very often we're going to want to play shove with a hand like this because it's going to be devalued very often on the turn, whereas there are other hands that might be more efficient to slow play. I need to pause this video because I have 4 kittens that are making a lot of noise and I don't want that to interrupt the video, so one moment. Okay, sorry about that. My kittens were just like jumping on each other. Anyways, so this is a situation where the big blind 3 bets hijack, and what you'll find is that the big blind range is going to be very polarized. So they're going to be 3-betting less hands like ace-jack suited, ace-queen suited, pocket tens. And you'll see that the range is very, very concentrated towards stuff like pocket aces, pocket kings, pocket queens, ace king, and then various other combinations that don't mind facing a 4-bet because they can either call efficiently or they can end up folding efficiently. So because of this range composition, in position does not have incentive to start 4-betting hands like ace king as often and start 4-betting hands like pocket queens, etc. So in position on this texture, and I could be wrong, but my idea here, it feels like strategically that out of position is actually going to play a relatively high frequency check because basically the advantages are neutral in this spot. It's not like the big blind 3-bet and then he's doing amazing, because actually in position is calling a very large 3-bet, and then in addition to that, out of position is not really 3-betting all that much ace king, ace queen, and in position is flatting a lot of these kind of hands as well. Also, the big blind is going to be very like queens heavy, some jacks, some kings, and in position is probably going to have very similar amount of nuts. Remember, the big blind is not three betting hands like pocket sixes or eights as often, so even though that the big blind is going to be doing pretty good in terms of equity, but it's not always that just because you have an equity advantage that you want to put a lot of money in. Just because you have a stronger war, you don't always want to attack first. Sometimes you want to play a little bit more defensively and see how things develop. Other times it's quite the opposite. You want to push your advantage. So kings is a very efficient hand to check, because if you are going to organize checks and bets in your range, you'll find that something like kings doesn't really deny equity from any hands. Whereas if you three bet a hand like pocket jacks and you decide to check, you may end up allowing a hand like king queen, king 10, queen 10, etc. to hit an overcard. So when you look at hands that are efficient, something like kings would be decent to put in your checking range. Also, you'll find that if you have too many kings in your checking range, then when a king comes, your opponent simply will not put money in on a king as often, and then you'll realize that, or you might figure out that it might have been better to bet the flop more often with the king, because in the betting range when a king comes, they don't expect you to improve that often, etc. There's all this kind of equilibrium logic. You don't need to go so deep. I'm kind of going, I think we're spending too much time on this, but I do want to break down some of the overall ideas. I also could be wrong. It might just be very strong texture for the big blind to bet a lot. But anyways, we're going to kind of continue to use this logic. Again, very similar logic on the turn. We're going to continue checking. I think I should probably click buttons a lot faster and talk more. But yeah. So we're gonna, I think here on the river, something of this sizing is appropriate at this point, because kings is basically worth a decent amount of money. I could continue talking about that spot, but it's fine. We'll move on. So we're in the hijack and we 3-bet UTG. You can think about the UTG range here. He's calling a lot of hands like broadways. He's calling a lot of pocket pairs, and he's going to be 4-betting a lot of hands like aces, kings, queens, right? He's getting a decent price pre-flop with the blinds that are dead money, and also he's invested 2 or 2.5 big blinds when he RFI'd. So he's calling a pretty wide range in this situation. So in position is going to have a strong advantage, especially in the region of aces, kings, queens, jacks, tens. They also have pocket nines, the hijack, and UTG will have some hands like pocket nines, sixes, but basically in position is doing very well. So you're going to see an extremely high bet frequency in this situation. It's at only 28%, but the overall frequency for the range is higher. It's just the GTO Wizard will be using multiple different sizings. Now again, the texture of 7-7-3, like we said in the spot big blind versus UTG, it's another spot where we might want to end up being a bit more polarized. A hand like King 9 actually kind of forces in position to start folding some hands like King Queen, King Jack, King 10. So when you looked at your King X region, this might be one of the efficient hands to be betting. At the same time, though, if you start betting all of your overcards and you don't have just hearts that are going to basically turn, and you have something like King 9, Queen 9, Jack 9, all these other kind of hands, it's not amazing. So this texture in general, you want to think big picture, there's going to be a lot of check, because you simply have so many overcards that you don't want to put too much money in the pot, because your opponent still has a decent range. So you're kind of like, even though you have overpairs, but a bunch of your other range doesn't really want to put money in. A bunch of your range wants to actually check and see free cards. That's the way that a lot of your range is going to end up making EV in this situation, which is basically what ends up making sense. Now, I don't know exactly what King 9 is going to do here. I'm actually confused, but I think we're going to see, oh, so apparently it's basically never betting. It seems like the King High region just wants to check this kind of hand. And maybe maybe it's more efficient to be betting something like King X of hearts, or King, maybe like weaker hands like Jack High or 10 high, etc. Now the 6 is a very good card for our opponent's range, so then when we think about what we're going to continue betting, it might make sense to continue betting hands like a gut shot like Ace 5, Ace 4, maybe we have some other weaker hands that would make sense, maybe something like 10-9 suited, 9-8 suited, 10-8 suited, etc. At this point, if we are betting hands like King 9, maybe we're over bluffing a little bit, and especially because this is actually a very good card for his range, we don't want to totally overdo it. This is very efficient to go with the check fold. So this video is at 10 minutes. I'm going to end it here because we are at 10 minutes. I want to keep these around 10 minutes. If there's any suggestions on this format, I would like information because I've not really thought about how to make GTO Wizard videos before, but I think that talking about the thought process is valuable. But maybe maybe I can go deeper, or maybe I should just click through hands faster. If you have an idea, I would really appreciate your feedback because I don't have access to anybody else's mind. And sometimes I'm in the mood to want to watch a video where someone is going deep, and sometimes that bores the shit out of me. So please let me know. Okay, we will see you in the next episode. Thank you.